It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of October 21st, 1994. Again, we got 7 movies to look at, a lot to get to, so let's just jump on into it. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is Warren Beatty and Annette Bening starring in the remake of Love Affair. Notice how I almost said Love Story, but this is not the remake of Love Story. Actually, considering how remake crazy Hollywood gets, I'm actually surprised that we haven't gotten the remake of Love Story yet. Now that I've said it, it's coming. So I guess brace yourself for that. But no, this is the remake of Love Affair, based off of a 1939 movie. I'm not too familiar with it. I can't remember who stars in it actually, but that's what this is. This is a modern day remake version of it with Warren Beatty and Annette Bening, who, of course, at the time were a real life couple. And most notably, they met on Bugsy, and Warren Beatty was for the longest time a single man. Then he met as kind of a bachelor, and then he meets Annette Bening on the set of Bugsy, and they eventually get together in the end. And this is one of those examples of a movie where you probably don't want to work with your spouse on screen. It has not worked. It has not worked very well for a number of people. Sometimes you get something good, sometimes not so, but more times not as much. But this movie was not very good. I mean, even if you haven't seen the original film, this one is just way too sappy for its own good. The story isn't really all that engaging whatsoever. There's nothing really interesting that's happening here. And surprisingly, the chemistry between Beatty and Bening doesn't work well here like it did in Bugsy. Like in Bugsy, it actually works better, but here it just doesn't really feel legitimate. It doesn't feel like it makes any purpose to the story. The cast overall, the supporting cast overall is okay here. You got Gary Shandling, Pierce Brosnan, Kate Capshaw, Paul Mazursky, Brenda Vaccaro, Katharine Hepburn in one of her final film roles. I mean, it's the only movie you'll ever hear her say the F word, so I guess that's something to say about it. But let me put it this way. If the critic does a better joke about this, which is one of their more underrated jokes, that probably should tell you everything you need to know about how bad this movie is. That right there is the most memorable thing you could say about Love Affair. So that should really tell you a whole lot about this movie. But so that's Love Affair. Let's move on to the next movie, which also isn't as memorable. It's Donald Sutherland starring in the horror thriller The Puppet Masters, and see if you can guess what this movie is basically being. It's another ripoff of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which Donald Sutherland was in the 70s version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and we even had another Body Snatchers remake in this year in 1994, which was a whole lot better, but this is pretty much that movie. I mean, it's pretty much the exact same thing, and it doesn't help that there was studio interference, and that's basically what happened here. The original scriptwriters wanted to do something more faithful to the original story that this is based off of, by, who's the guy that, I'm looking at the name here, Robert A. Heinlein. And they wanted to do something that was more faithful to his story, but Disney wanted to do an adaptation that they could sell. So they basically just said, let's just make a diet version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because like I said, that's pretty much what it is. It's just like it really it takes a lot of the original story plot, like it takes out elements of the novel, while portions of the film, I mean, it basically kind of follows the same plot as the story, but at the same time, they take out critical elements of that novel, and in the end, like I said, it's just Invasion of the Body Snatchers and not a very good version. I mean, they fill it with some notable names in here. Besides Sutherland, you have Julie Warner, Keith David, Will Patton, Richard Belzer's in here, Gary Bauman, Uncle Frank from Home Alone, Yaphet Kotto's in here, and yeah, you can get these names in here, but unfortunately, if you don't have anything to do to make it stand out on its own, then what's the point? What's the point of making this movie except to make a quick buck and not even try? It's just like, yeah, I really don't understand what they were thinking here. It's like, it's just a knockoff of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And again, 1994 had a much better Body Snatchers movie than this, and that was Body Snatchers, the one with the one by Abel Ferrara that came out early in the year. And yeah, this doesn't do any favors for it. It's unfortunately not. It doesn't work at all. It's just, like I said, it's just a knockoff of Body Snatchers, and it's not a very good knockoff. So let's get away from that one. Let's move on to the next movie, and that is the George Lucas produced Radioland Murders. Again, this is one of those trailers, kind of like what we saw the week before with Exit to Eden, where you don't really know what kind of a movie they're trying to sell you. I mean, this whole movie is basically being sold on the fact that George Lucas is heavily involved in this. He was not only one of the producers, he co-wrote the story for this. In fact, William Huck and Gloria Katz, who wrote Howard the Duck and also worked on some other Lucas projects, also were involved in this movie. It's got a really good cast involved. I mean, you got Brian Benben from Dream On, which the director of this, Mel Smith, actually directed an episode of Dream On. Mary Stuart Masterson, Michael Lerner, Ned Beatty, Michael McKean, Bobcat Goldthwait, Jeffrey Tambor, Christopher Lloyd, Billy Barty, Rosemary Clooney, the last film appearance of George Burns. I mean, this should have something there to really make it work. And it sounds like a pretty good idea, but the trailer just shows you everything that's wrong with it. It doesn't know what kind of a movie it wants to be. Like, does it want to be a screwball comedy? Does it want to be a period piece film? It's like it's trying to sell itself way too much. And Universal, and again, I think Universal got involved in this. This is another movie that I think was dealt with studio interference because they wanted to update the script for the MTV generation, which, how are you supposed to update a script that takes place in the 1930s and the 40s for the MTV generation? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And sadly, the movie just doesn't work on those levels. The comedy isn't funny. It doesn't know what kind of a movie it wants to be. It doesn't know what kind of a story it wants to tell. It can look very nice. It can look like a period piece film, but again, there's just no real motivation of what's going on. The cast isn't working well together. The film is just an overall mess of a film that just has so many good ideas for it, but it just can't decide on what kind of a film it wants to be. Like, what does it want to sell us in the end? And movies like there are movies like this that are very similar but do their job a whole lot better. We've talked about them before in the past, like the Hudsucker Proxy, which came out earlier in the year, which I still think is a great film, and Brain Donors, a very underrated film from a couple years ago. But sadly, this movie just doesn't have anything of merit to it. It's one of those movies that was only sold mostly because of the fact that George Lucas had his name on it. It's kind of like Red Tails, that movie that came out 10 years ago where they had Bryan Cranston and Cuba Gooding Jr. and they were going to do this film about the Tuskegee. Was that the one about the Tuskegee Airmen? See, I can't even remember because it was so long ago since I saw it, and I don't remember it being that good. But they only sold that movie because George Lucas's name was attached to it as the producer, and not everything. It just goes to show you that not everything that Lucas had his hands on was a success, and we've seen a number of those over the course of the last of the few decades since Star Wars, the original Star Wars series ended, and it just didn't work. It's a movie that just. It doesn't know what kind of a film it wants to be. So much promise, so much potential. It just didn't work. It's a movie that's really lackluster on so many levels. Just a missed opportunity on so many levels. And that's pretty much all you can say about Radioland Murder. So let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is Woody Allen's latest film, Bullets Over Broadway. Now, here's a period piece comedy that actually does work and has a star-studded cast to it. You've got Jim Broadbent, John Cusack, Diane Wiest, who won an Academy Award for this, Chaz Palminteri, Jennifer Tilly, Harvey Fierstein, Mary Louise Parker, Rob Reiner, Tracy Ullman. Just a great cast overall. And it did everything right that I think Radioland Murders did wrong. It was a movie that feels like... That was a movie that felt like they were trying to sell you something that... They didn't know what kind of a film they wanted to sell you on, but... This movie right away knows what it wants to sell you. It wants to sell you a period piece film written by Woody Allen, directed by Woody Allen, and it's definitely right up to what you expect from Woody Allen's work. It's a very good film, strong cast overall, very funny stuff. It's one of his most memorable films that came out at this time, and it was actually kind of part of a renaissance for him, because the last couple of movies he made were not big successes. We're talking about stuff like Alice, Shadows and Fog, Husbands and Wives, Manhattan Murder Mystery. This was kind of the first one that actually kind of turned his career around a little bit in the 90s. He had like kind of a little bit of a renaissance. And made a pretty good movie out of it. It's a really solid film all around. Very funny, very Woody Allen-esque. I mean, if you want to see Woody Allen being Woody Allen, this is definitely the Woody Allen film to see. Woody Allen. That's Bullets Over Broadway. But let's move on to another Miramax film that came out this weekend. One I think is a lot better and has a lasting legacy for a number of reasons. Kevin Smith's first directorial film, and that is, of course, Clerks. You know, considering I've worked in retail now for about 20 years, I mean, technically you can kind of consider grocery stores a retail sort of thing. I've related to this movie more and more than I've seen it. I saw this just the year before I got my first job at the grocery store that I work at, it's amazing how much that this movie has held up over so many years, and that's kind of the charm of this movie. It just works on so many levels because it's a simple premise that leads to a ton of great laughs and enjoyment all around. You basically just have two guys working in a convenience store, and here's all the misadventures they go through during the course of the day. And that's really the beauty of the movie. Kevin Smith manages to direct a film that has so many over-the-top moments that can happen at a store during the day, but can actually happen in real life. Some of the stuff this movie gets away with is so spot on and so hilarious, and I've seen it right in front of my face when I've worked at the place that I've worked at in the last couple of decades. And yeah, it definitely shows in this movie that how much I can relate to it. The chemistry between Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson as Dante and Randall just is excellent. You immediately get the sense that they know each other for a long time. They've got this good riff going on between each other. And then you have Jay and Silent Bob, which, yeah, what more can you say about them that hasn't been said already? They're hilarious, and these guys that just stick around the store all the time, sitting outside the store and just, like, do whatever they need to do. I mean, like I said, this movie has held up well over time. It's a film that is hilarious, very hilarious, extremely funny, well written, well directed, well acted. It's one of the reasons why Kevin Smith became the man that we know him as today. It's the film that launched his career. It's been the thing that's been most notable with him for so many years. It's a great film. It's a fantastic film. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Can't recommend this one enough. Clerks, haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. With that said, let's move on to the next movie, and that is Louis Malle's adaptation of Vanya on 42nd Street. I mean, there's just so much there to appreciate. I mean, David Mamet wrote this. Louis Malle directed it. He directed the great film My Dinner with Andre. It's got most of the same people in there. And it's a very intriguing take on this story that we've seen done before. It's basically an intimate interpretive performance of Uncle Vanya. You basically have these actors in New York rehearsing this story in a theater that's dilapidated down, and you have them basically just in this one theater throughout the course of the movie reciting this story, and it just works really well. I mean, Wallace Shawn is great as Vanya. You got Julianne Moore in here playing Yelena. Just a great cast all around. Larry Pine, Brooke Smith, George Gaines. A lot of the people who collaborated with Mal on My Dinner with Andre are in this movie. And it's just a well-made film. It's a film that just is so unique in the way that they portray the story. And you don't really think they could do something different with it, but they surprisingly do. They surprisingly make it work. They surprisingly make it very unique, very different from what you'd expect. It's a well-made film. It's an astonishingly made film, a very underrated version of the story, and I can't recommend it enough. If you haven't seen this movie, definitely check it out. It's not quite My Dinner with Andre good, but this movie definitely works. This is a film that definitely works very well on its own, so definitely check it out if you can. With that said, let's move on to the last movie that we have here, and that is the French film Torment. So I don't really know too much about this particular film. All I know is that the woman in this movie, Emmanuel Barrett, was also in the first Mission Impossible movie, who plays, I guess he played kind of Tom Cruise's love interest in there. But other than that, though, I really do not know anything about this movie. But I mean, judging by this trailer, it definitely gives this idea that it's one of those movies where you have this married couple, and as their marriage goes on, they slowly but surely begin to split apart, and one person's going to make the other person's life a living hell. In this case, it's the wife in this movie, and that's pretty much all I know about it. But I mean, it looks nice. It looks like a nicely made film. That's not really a whole much more I can add to it because I haven't seen it. But so there you go. But that's Torment, or as it's called, or apparently as it's called in French, Hell. That's literally what it's called here. I'll show you. Right there, you can see. Can you see? Yeah, there you go. Hell. I just did that for nothing. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. We'll end October on the next episode with 6 movies, including Kurt Russell and James Spader and Roland Emmerich's Stargate. We also have The Road to Wellville, Silent Fall, Squanto, A Warrior's Tale, Drop Squad, and also The Last Seduction. So 6 movies to look at on the next episode, and we'll do that on the next time we see each other. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time, and until then, take care.